again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 5th day of November 2021. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First graphic up here, we can see there is a winter weather advisory out for the eastern Arctic coast. That's out until 10 p.m. this evening. And that's for 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts out of the east to create blowing snow that reduce visibility less than a half mile at times across that area there. Seeing gusts 50-55 miles an hour all day long up in that area out of the east-northeast. Strongest winds over toward Kaktovik and Barter Island with gusts around 55 miles an hour, and then gusts down to about 50 miles an hour over toward Dead Horse. And then central coastal areas there, they drop down to about 35 miles an hour or so for the gusts. And again, that's out until 10 p.m. this evening. Otherwise, no other watches, warnings, or advisories around the state. Out west, no big storms on the horizon. Maybe some gale force winds coming into the Aleutians with a kind of a mediocre front here coming in tomorrow and tomorrow night or over the weekend. Otherwise, moving along past the frames of yesterday, and the days before, for some reason, these should be blocked out and they're not. Anyway, we'll get the thing rolling here, and satellite imagery showing clouds across the southeast coast once again. Low pressure down south of the area there, but not a lot of rain. Just kind of cloudy and wet conditions there. Juneau had about 1/10 of an inch precipitation, 12-hour period or so, and Ketchikan 2/10 of an inch, about 1/4 of an inch over at Yakutat. And that moisture feed still flowing up into the North Gulf Coast and cutting across the Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet, and then just a lot of mostly mid and high level clouds streaming in over interior Alaska. But that orientation becoming less north and south and more southeast and northwest with each passing day. And you can see the band in the last few frames there beginning to really thin out, getting some holes and rips in the cloud band there, especially over Prince William Sound there to begin with, and then another surge rolls in, and then behind that it starts to thin out. And on today's chart, you can see that what was a front now just weakened into a trough with a lot of clouds and low clouds with some rain and snow shower activity, about half an inch to an inch falling in the Anchorage area and around south central Alaska Kenai Peninsula areas, mostly over the north, dry down to the south there. But low pressure up over Kotzebue Sound there brought 3 to 4 inches of snow to the Kotzebue area, and maybe even some heavier amounts up along the southern slopes of the DeLong Mountains Brooks Range. But gusty winds as high as, Tin City had a peak wind gust of about 51 miles an hour today, as did Cape Newenham. So the strong winds continue to blow, strong northerlies continue to blow through the Bering Strait. Not so much St. Lawrence Island, lightening up there, still a little breezy, but winds continue coming down. But winds increase along the southwest coast, that band of stronger northwest wind shifting eastward there with a high pressure to the west kind of building eastward as well as that next front pushes up toward the western Aleutians. Otherwise, kind of drying out over Kodiak Island today. Low pressure now to your east and starting to get into a northwest wind flow there. That should continue to dry it out and clear it out into tonight. Probably see some clearing and increasing winds, especially through the bays. Could see gusts 35, maybe even 40 miles an hour. Periods of rain continue. Weak front off the coast of the Panhandle there, and trough. Periods of rain or snow depending on elevation, latitude, and of course time of night. And then areas of snow showers across southern Alaska, Copper River Basin, mostly southern and western portions of the Copper River Basin. And then a trough keeps areas of light snow and snow showers in from the Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula, all of the west coast areas and inland along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Not so much Bristol Bay, but periods of snow continue, maybe another couple inches falling up north of the Seward Peninsula there, Kotzebue, Kivalina, Red Dog, and those areas, possibly Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, and the southern slopes of the western mountains there. But that really tapers off as you head east. Don't look for a whole lot of snow shower activity for Coldfoot or Arctic Village, for example. And then for tomorrow, big high pressure out over the central Bering Sea. And then some snow showers continuing, but all diminishing. Winds diminishing, snow shower activity diminishing for the Alaska Peninsula. as well as the southwest coast, slowly ending, but it will continue throughout the day. And also showers will be ending from south to north over the panhandle, and that kind of a broad brush of the entire day. You'll see some showers, but by afternoon they'll be mostly restricted to the north, ending in the south there. Low pressure of the Gulf of Alaska kind of hanging back to the west a little bit, so that keeps it unsettled for the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, south central Alaska areas. Dry north of the Alaska Range with some clearing and colder temperatures. With the clearing skies there and the diminishing winds come down considerably. Although the gales, I believe, hold through tomorrow for the eastern Arctic coast. Winds will be in a downward mode, and by Sunday, with high pressure and over the western north slope, no gradient at all. Look for lighter winds, colder temperatures, northeasterly flow increasing over interior Alaska, and that's going to trend the temperatures downwards, especially eventually south across southern Alaska as well. And the panhandle, seeing clearing skies. Pretty good day on Sunday with temperatures not too bad, starting to trend downwards, of course, at night with the clear skies, and then even colder temperatures in store for next week and windier conditions. Otherwise, high pressure, eastern Aleutians looks pretty good there for the Fox Islands. Pribilos, maybe a lingering snow shower or two, and that's about it with light winds and drying out along the west coast. Rain or snow showers still possible for the Alaska Peninsula, and wind and rain pushing to the central Aleutians. For lows, let's see, let me get up here to the main graphics. Here we go. Lows for let's see, Saturday morning, mid-teens Copper River Basin, 15 to 20 Kuskokwim Valley, Bristol Bay 15 to 20 for your lows as well, near 30 Kodiak Island in the 20s, south central Alaska and Prince William Sound upper 20s, 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 40 to 45 for the southeast coast, mostly in the mid-40s, lower to mid-40s. Highs lower 20s, Copper River Basin, mid-20s, Kuskokwim Valley, upper 20s in Bristol Bay, lower 30s, Kodiak Island, lower to mid-30s for the Kenai Peninsula. Manuscus-Susitna Valley, near freezing. And for the lows on Sunday morning, 10 to 15 or 5 to 15 Copper River Basin, mid-teens for the Kuskokwim Valley, mid to upper teens for Bristol Bay, and lower 20s now for the Susitna Valley, and probably 20 to 28 for the Kenai Peninsula Anchorage area as well. Upper 20s Kodiak Island, near 30 along the North Gulf Coast. Lows starting to edge down below freezing finally for the southeast coast there. Lows 30 to 35, followed by highs upper 30s, Juneau to Skagway and Haines, and those areas, Lynn Canal. Otherwise upper 40s toward Craig and Klawock. And let me back up. Highs in the lower 20s, Copper River Basin, lower 20s, Kuskokwim Valley. And we're looking at mid-20s for the highs Sunday afternoon for Bristol Bay, near freezing for Kodiak Island for your afternoon high temperature. So definitely colder air coming in across southern Alaska with highs barely cracking freezing, even right along the coastline of the North Gulf Coast. And up north for Saturday morning, 5 to 15 for your lows, and definitely in the teens, central interior, near 20 out toward the Seward Peninsula, upper teens, St. Lawrence Island, highs lower to mid-20s, much of the interior, and 20 to 25 from the North Slope Arctic Coast Brooks Range, followed by Sunday morning lows, 0 to 10 for the North Slope and Eastern Arctic Coast into the Brooks Range, even the Upper Yukon Valley falling down into the single numbers, and lower teens for the Tanana Valley, even the Seward Peninsula Nome forecast low 11 for Sunday morning, Savunga 21, and single numbers now showing up, Northway and Tok, clearing skies, colder, drier air coming in from the northeast, starting a trend of colder temperatures for next week, and for the high Sunday afternoon, in the lower to mid-20s, central interior, in the teens for the Brooks Range. Noatak Valley, Kotzebue, highs in the mid-teens, upper teens for the eastern Arctic coast, and lower to mid-20s for the western Arctic coast. And out to the southwest, we've got lows in the 30s for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s, lower 30s, mid-20s Pribilofs, followed by highs just a shade above freezing for St. Paul, St. George. Lower to mid-40s, central western Aleutians, upper 30s, eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Low Sunday morning, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians, lower 30s, and 25 to 30 for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Line weather, IFR, central western interior, especially up to the northwest, along the Noatak Valley, northwest coast there, and Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound. IFR southward in the Kuskokwim Valley, up to the Alaska Range. Marginal VFR Cook Inlet, but some VFR northern Cook Inlet, Manduska, Susitna Valley, then IFR western Copper River Basin, and marginal from the North Gulf Coast, marginal VFR for the Panhandle, mostly marginal with a few areas of VFR out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, but IFR increasing west central Aleutians. Eastern Arctic Coast, eastern North Slope, VFR for the afternoon. For the afternoon Saturday, we've got continued VFR eastern Arctic Coast and most of the North Slope, marginal VFR central and western Arctic Coast through the Bering Strait, and a swath of VFR in the central Bering Sea extending down to the Fox Islands, and IFR still over Amchitka Island, close to Kiska, but most of it staying to the south, and some VFR now for the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, VFR Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, marginal VFR Kenai Peninsula, all of interior Alaska with some areas of IFR, northern Panhandle IFR, central Panhandle marginal, and the southern areas VFR. And for the day on, or for the morning Sunday, VFR, southern 3/4 of the southeast coast with some lower conditions, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay and the North Gulf Coast looking marginal. IFR along and north of the Alaska Range or west of the Alaska Range, including the Kuskokwim Valley, the Kuskokwim Mountains, and most of the central western Brooks Range, central western North Slope, and the central Arctic Coast, all IFR. And for the afternoon Sunday, IFR North Slope, eastern Arctic Coast, otherwise marginal VFR up that way. Some VFR eastern Brooks Range into the Yukon Flats there along the Porcupine River Valley, Noatak Valley looking VFR. IFR northern Seward Peninsula, including Buckland, but Shishmaref marginal. Kivalina marginal. Most of Bering Sea marginal VFR, still that area of IFR out over the western Aleutians west of Adak. And some areas of marginal VFR, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, mostly VFR though, south of the Alaska Range, south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, even Prince William Sound, and the North Gulf Coast, all VFR for this afternoon Sunday, as well as much of the Panhandle. Passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, occasional marginal VFR tomorrow, and Lake Clark and Merrill, lowest conditions, western entrance, possibly IFR. And same pattern for rainy, lowest conditions, IFR possibly on the western entrance, otherwise marginal. Windy, marginal VFR, but VFR south side, lower conditions north. And Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentasta, marginal VFR. Tanita, marginal VFR, but VFR out the west entrance. And Portage looks kind of marginal. Chilcoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, warm air aloft, a continued persistent week or more of southerly flow pushed 4,000 feet all the way up to the Arctic coast there. Otherwise, 2,000 feet over the Panhandle at the surface, hugging the North Gulf Coast, east side of Kodiak, across the Bering Sea, 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the west central Aleutians. And from there, icing. Chance of some icing for the western Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula there, the lower Yukon River Valley and Delta has a threat of some possible very isolated, probably just light mixed icing. Same thing for the Seward Peninsula northwest coast. Leftover band of light to isolated moderate rime or mixed icing from the northern Panhandle line east-west along the North Gulf Coast and the northern Cook Inlet to the western Alaska Range. And the jet stream. Trough kind of edging eastward now. One center in over the southwest interior, one over the southern Gulf of Alaska. So southeast flow now instead of southerly, more east-southeast, 50-65 knots, turn south-southeast, 65-70 knots, northern interior. And the eastern Bering Sea still looking at northerlies, 55-60 knots, turning northwest 95 across the False Pass area. And for 9,000 feet, northerlies 40 knots, eastern Bering Sea. Otherwise, southeast 40 knots, North Gulf Coast, turning at arm, Prince William Sound, 30 knots, northern Panhandle, southeast 45, eastern North Slope and Arctic Coast, 3,000 feet, northerlies 20 to 25 knots, stepped up to 40 knots through Kamishak Gap, and 40 knot northwesterlies, western Seward Peninsula, turbulence, moderate chop, the Alaska Peninsula, Seward Peninsula, moderate chop, western Arctic Coast, and much of the Panhandle.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire, right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere, and F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather can be hydrology,
Right.
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind.
Right.
It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the
Right.
smoke is coming from. And it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and looked down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 micron.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one? Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit,
Right.
and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where it's the active fire
That is where
front.
it's burning right now.
And it's
Amazing.
3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters on where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it. If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or a succession of images. Now this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before.
Right.
And that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is.
Okay.
You'll note, though, in the infrared, guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. These channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, you got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time.
Right.
It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we
Fair
can talk
enough.
about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the rim fire, again kind of a horseshoe shape showing that active fire front down there, and then we'll look again to the day-night band the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the rimfire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year.
Right,
that was, you know, that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these that we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure, sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property, and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. See you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at the coastal water forecasts, outer coastline of the Panhandle, south coast, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots for the day Saturday, and east-southeast to 30 knots on the north coast. These running 12 to 15 feet. Lighter winds over the inside waters with Clarence Strait only looking at a northeast breeze at 15 knots, but seas are up to 8 feet, so small craft advisories there. And southeast 20 knots with 4-foot sea, but gale force gusts out of the southeast to 40 knots there for Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And the outlook for Sunday. Lynn Canal, north winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet, north winds 20 knots for Stevens Passage with 4-foot seas, and winds stay light for Clarence Strait, southeast at about 15 knots. Small craft advisories on the south coast, east winds 30 knots with 8-foot seas, and southeast winds 20 knots central coast, east winds at 20 knots for the north coast. Prince William Sound, north winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Cook Inlet, north to northwest breeze at 10 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas. Light variable winds for the western North Gulf Coast at 10 knots. And southeast 15 around Middleton Island. Gale warnings for Camashack Bay, northwest winds 35 knots, seas 11 feet. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, northwest winds 30 knots with 8-foot seas. And for Sunday, Barren Islands, north 25, seas 6 feet. Northwest 25 for Camashack Bay with 7-foot seas. North winds 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet, 3 to 4-foot seas. Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, northeast winds at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas. And Bristol Bay, northwest winds at 20 knots with 7-foot seas. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay on Sunday, north winds 25 knots. North winds 25 knots for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and northwest 25 knots for the Pacific side from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Northwest winds at 30 knots. Kodiak Island, north winds 20 to 25 knots, 4 to 6-foot seas. Front Alaska Island, west-northwest winds tomorrow 15 to 20 knots. Unmak Island, northeast at 15. Small craft advisories for Adak and Atka for east winds 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings from Amchitka Island to Shemya for east winds at 35 knots with 12 to 14-foot seas. And on Sunday, Shemya to Kiska, northeast winds 30 knots. Gale warnings from Amchitka Island, east at 35 knots. Adak and Atka, east winds 30 knots, seas 9 to 12 feet. Unmak Island, east winds 25 knots. And on Alaska Island, north winds at 20. For the southwest coast, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, 25-knot northwest winds for St. Matthew Island, 20 knots out of the northwest for the Pribilofs, and St. Lawrence Island, northwest 30 knots. Small craft advisories for Norton Sound for northeast winds at 25 knots. Those fall back to 10 knots with a sound on Sunday from the north. St. Lawrence Island winds coming down to 15 knots from the northwest. Southwest coast, northerlies 20 to 25 knots, north 15 for the Pribilofs, north of 20 for St. Matthew Island. Gale warnings for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, 35 to 40 knot gale force winds from the east-southeast tomorrow for the extreme eastern coast, strongest toward Demarcation Point. Small craft advisory on the central coast, south at 30 knots, southwest 15, western Arctic coast, Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northwest at 25, and gale warnings from Cape Thompson to Wales for northwest winds at 35 knots. Those swing around to the southwest and fall to 10 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort on Sunday. Western central Arctic coast, light northwest winds at 10 knots, and 15 to 25 knots southeast winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, low pressure on the western Arctic coast will produce an area of snow with a trough that'll cover much of western Alaska, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches possible, so snowfall amounts are light, although locally up to 3 inches for the DeLong Mountains and the western Brooks Range on the southern slopes. Otherwise, snow showers and areas of snow, southern Alaska, mixed with rain along the coast, mixed rain and snow for the Panhandle as the weak front moves in, wind and rain for the western Aleutians. And for Saturday, it looks wet and breezy for the central and western Aleutians. It looks unsettled for the North Gulf Coast with periods of light rain or snow. Same thing for the Panhandle. Light snow, scattered showers along the Alaska Range with dry over the northern interior, and decreasing snow and wind over the west along the west coast and eastern Bering Sea continues into Sunday as high pressure builds into the northern interior. Look for drier conditions and colder temperatures with light snow eastern interior into the North Gulf Coast, dry for the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.